Let's talk MAFEX. So what is going on, my fellow collectors? How is everybody doing today? Daredevil19 here, and today I want to talk about where MAFEX started as a figure company with their 1/12 scale figures, with where they began from their rough points with too many breaks and QC issues, to where they updated and fixed those issues to where they are currently at today, and how great of a figure company they have become. Alright, so before we continue, I did make a little error. So their first figure was actually from the first Amazing Spider-Man. So that was their number one figure. Then their number two was the 1.0 Christian Bale Batman. And then number 3 and 4 were the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man. So I did mess up a little bit there, but I will correct it as I'm editing. So I wanted to put this in before we continue on. And I didn't own that Spider-Man, so I couldn't tell you how good or bad of a figure it was. I'm sure it probably had similar issues with loose joints, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so I couldn't really tell you guys. But let's continue on, shall we, with the video? So in the beginning, with what I believe was their very first 6-inch scale figure, the Dark Knight Christian Bale Batman, I absolutely love that figure, and I was really impressed with how they engineered their action figures, and I knew they had tons of potential. But it did start off a little rough for them, even with their first figure. That Batman would fall apart extremely easily at the joints, and you would always have to pop the figure back together. For example, the arms unpegged way too easily at the shoulder joint, the waist would pop off at the joint, and a few other parts as well. It wasn't the biggest issue, but definitely an annoying one, which probably prevented potential new customers from buying this figure or future figures from them. Their next big figure in their 6-inch scale line was the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, because the movie just released. This was another figure that was pretty nice, but also had its issues. This one did not suffer from parts popping off at the joints. Well, mine did unglue on either the left or right arm. I believe it was the left arm at the shoulder, and I did have to glue it back on. That was also another issue with their figures, is the glue they used wasn't durable enough, and parts would come off, and then you would have to glue them back on. Like, what the heck? But another main issue with this specific Spider-Man was the joints were super loose, and I'm talking bad loose, especially the arms and legs. It was difficult to put them in poses because of that issue. They did make a few different versions of this Spider-Man, same figure, just different accessories and such, and this was before their figure number 5 was released. So their third character they made, which was figure number 5 in their line, was the Dark Knight Heath Ledger Joker. This figure was great for when it released, but the face sculpts were a bit off, and if I do remember, I believe it had a bit of loose leg joints as well. But I do remember the faces were just really bad. So yeah, MAFEX had a rough start with just their first 2 releases. Their Heath Ledger Joker wasn't as bad, but both the Christian Bale Batman and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man had some amazing detail to them and very accurate to the source material, which is a huge plus that collectors loved about the line. At first, they mainly focused on Marvel and DC movie characters, and they eventually jumped into Star Wars movie characters. They even made a 7 Deadly Sins Meliodas. Sorry if I said his name wrong, but I heard that figure was a train wreck. And they also did a Frozen Olaf and Snowgeese set, but they never did anything else from them again. So when MAFEX hit the teen numbers, like around 11 through 19, of the amount of figures they were currently at, this is when Batman vs. Superman was coming out, and man, those figures were just bad. More Superman than Batman, and MAFEX still around this time were having QC issues with their figures. I remember my Superman's wire on his cape kept popping out, and his ankle joints were super loose, and I was just extremely frustrated with that figure. Plus the face sculpts were just horrible. Their Batman wasn't as bad, but the torso looked weird the way it was shaped. And for some reason, they gave Superman wire in his cape, but not Batman, and the cloth for the Batman cape was a really nice material. I also wasn't a fan of the face sculpt on Batman because it did not look like Affleck under the mask. This was also the time where it was very scary swapping hands because their wrist joints broke so easily and were just super fragile. Still to this day, I get a little nervous swapping their hands. But I do remember I always had to widen the peg holes on all my MAFEX figures' hands. Now I don't have to do that anymore, which we'll talk about a little later. Now jumping ahead a bit to where MAFEX hit a little over 30 figures and into the 40s too. I like that they number their figures because it's easy to track where they began. So the movie Suicide Squad was releasing, and both SH Figuarts and MAFEX made a couple characters from that movie. We mainly got Joker, Harley Quinn, and Deadshot. I remember I did have some issues with my version of Deadshot from MAFEX, which I wasn't too happy about, so I leaned more toward the Figuarts version, but MAFEX's Deadpool was a lot more accurate and had a ton more accessories compared to Figuarts. Figuarts did beat them though when it came to Harley Quinn. I wasn't a big fan of the MAFEX version, plus Figuarts' face sculpt on Harley was just spot on to Margot Robbie, while MAFEX's was not. I don't think they started using that 3D printing tech yet, or maybe they were, I'm not 100% sure about that. But the Jared Leto Joker, MAFEX made two versions. One in the purple trench coat and one in a white suit. And I remember the white suit version also had like a straitjacket upper torso for the purple trench coat Joker, which was freaking awesome. But meanwhile, Figuarts made the silver suit version, and the Figuarts one was just okay, and more of like a whatever type figure. But MAFEX, with both versions they made, turned out great. So during this time, I could see MAFEX getting slightly better, but still having issues, because I did get a Wonder Woman from her first movie from them that did break at the shoulder joint, which I was very disappointed about. So collectors are still experiencing issues with MAFEX figures, but they are slowly heading in the right direction. So moving ahead here on the MAFEX train, when the horrible first version of the Justice League movie was releasing, MAFEX made all the members from the movie, and this is when they started to get a little better. This is where MAFEX hit the number of figures currently made at the 50s and 60s around this time. This is where I still had a love-hate relationship with their figures, but I remember being impressed with their Justice League Batman and how much better it was compared to their Batman vs. Superman Batman, and same with Superman. This is the time where MAFEX started to turn things around. They upped the prices of their figures a little bit, but man, the quality was so much better. They fixed a lot of issues they used to have. I don't believe this happened yet, but a little after these Justice League figures, I didn't have to widen the peg holes on the wrist joints anymore, because they included these clear plastic holders that each hand was pegged into, and they still include them to this day, which I love and is also a very smart idea on MAFEX's behalf. So back to their Justice League version of figures. These, like I said, were so much better compared to their Batman vs. Superman versions, so they did redeem themselves. MAFEX is still the only import company that made the entire team from the Justice League movie. We did get some members of the Justice League from SH Figuarts, but they only made Wonder Woman, which was from her solo film, which I actually like better than MAFEX's. They also made Superman, The Flash, and Batman, and I liked all of MAFEX's versions much, much better. SH Figuarts decided, like usual when they do stuff like this, to skip out on Cyborg and Aquaman, so we couldn't complete their team in the SH Figuarts line. But MAFEX did a fantastic job with their versions of Cyborg and Aquaman. Their Flash was great too, and was much better than the Figuarts Flash. So they are slowly getting better, and that potential I told you I saw in them from their 1.0, the Dark Knight Christian Bale Batman, I started seeing in their figures. It's funny because MAFEX were on the bottom of my list of favorite figure companies, and now, today, they are high up at the top, maybe even my favorite. But if you compare their Justice League figures to the SH Figuarts ones, you can see how much more accurate they were to the characters, where Figuarts weren't as accurate. Like I said before, this is something collectors really do like about MAFEX. Same goes with their Star Wars figures. Also, this Justice League Batman from MAFEX is one of the most sought after Batflick action figures to this day. They actually had to reissue the figure at some point afterwards, and recently they announced they're doing another sort of reissue for their Zack Snyder cut Justice League line, so they're pretty much going to reissue him a third time, which is awesome. MAFEX started jumping into other lines with their figure line. Some sold well, while others didn't, because some continue, like Star Wars, John Wick, and of course DC and Marvel, while others didn't continue, like the Kingsman franchise and Fantastic Beasts and a couple others. But you can't knock them for trying out other lines. Every figure company does it. But skipping pretty far ahead here, to me this is where MAFEX hit the jackpot, and what I think was probably one of the smartest moves they could have made, and that is their comic book versions of characters from Marvel and DC Comics. I feel like this is some of their best stuff they've made. Example, the Scarlet Spider. Fantastic figure. Even their regular Spider-Man, amazing figure. This also introduced a lot of collectors into their figure line. So now we're getting more customers to buy their items. So I believe figure number 82 was their first comic version figure, and that was Deadpool. I thought this was a great figure, and at the time, this was my favorite 6-inch scale Deadpool figure, and I think it still is to this day. So their comic versions of figures were off to a good start. Only negative about their comic version Deadpool was he had no guns, which was odd. So it's like, what the hell, it's Deadpool, but that might have been because of Marvel and or Disney. Next, we got Evil Gwenpool, and I know they made a regular version of Gwenpool as well, but after her, we got the comic version of Wolverine in his classic yellow and blue suit. But it did suffer from an issue. It wasn't the worst thing, but it goes back to the very beginning with their 1.0 Christian Bale Batman. The arms would pop off very easily at the bicep swivel whenever you would swivel it, and a lot of collectors were not happy about that. It didn't bother me as much, but I understand why collectors weren't too happy with that. Besides, that figure was fan-freaking-tastic! But they did fix that issue with their brown suit Wolverine and their X-Force Wolverine, so we didn't have that issue after the next two Wolverine releases. But getting Wolverine started with an X-Men comic version line, because we got Cyclops next, and some people did complain that the torso wasn't long enough, but I thought it really wasn't too bad. So MAFEX was having issues here and there, but nothing like before, and some collectors still experience breaks here and there too, but nowhere near as bad as it used to be. I think my last break on a MAFEX figure was the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales, figure number 107, and Peter B. Parker, figure number 109. But ever since then, I haven't had any other breaks. Thank God. But continuing with their comic versions, they decided to jump into DC comic characters, and they hit us with a Batman Hush, Batman in the blue and gray classic suit, and collectors could not wait to get their hands on that figure. And MAFEX did an awesome job on that Batman. Plus, they made a black and gray suit variant, which was pretty awesome too, and I actually like that one more than the blue version. So now they're making both Marvel and DC comic versions of characters, and collectors were going crazy for them, loving it. But collectors really did dig what MAFEX was doing with these comic version characters. Then they hit us with a Dark Knight Returns Batman, which was freaking amazing. Then a comic version Spider-Man was next, which looked very similar to Todd McFarlane's Spidey artwork, and everyone absolutely loved that Spider-Man figure. Plus, they made a black suit or symbiote suit version, and then they did a couple more versions of the regular suit Spider-Man as well. MAFEX then continued hitting us with Batman Hush characters and more Spider-Man characters like Venom and Carnage. And they continued with their X-Men characters as well, like my personal favorite, Gambit. And then they also did a Storm and a Magneto and more on the way. Now they're making comic versions of the Avengers and recently revealed their comic version Captain America, which is actually up for pre-order right now. And they recently did reveal a Daredevil plus others. And for DC, they started a Batman Nightfall line, which they revealed Batman and Bane. They are also up for pre-order as well. Plus, they continued making characters from The Dark Knight Returns. Also, for their Batman Hush line, they just revealed a Scarecrow and the Riddler. So to this day, we are getting more and more from them with their comic version characters, and it's great. Collectors are loving it, including myself. So MAFEX did have a rough start, but they fixed most their issues and upgraded their figures and are killing it today. They still make movie versions of Marvel and DC characters, plus characters from other movies as well. And right now, as I'm making this video, they are close to hitting 200 figures, which I think will definitely happen by the end of this year. I personally love what they've been doing, and I hope they continue to do amazing work on their figures. Yeah, there's still issues here and there, but every figure company experiences issues like that. We just don't have those horrible, annoying issues we had to deal with from when MAFEX first started out. Thank God. But in the future, I would like to see them make a lot more stuff. Like maybe an IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line. How awesome would that be? Or maybe even a comic version Spawn line. I know that that'll be difficult to get, but Todd McFarlane can't hog that character forever. Even seeing them make more movie characters, like what they do with like John Wick or Fantastic Beasts, I would like to see them make the X-Men movie characters. I would absolutely love it! I tell you, love it! Because nobody really touched up on that. Yeah, Hasbro made a few Marvel Legends, but they only made a couple Wolverines, Mystique, Magneto, Professor X, and a couple others, but that's it. I'm talking like the first X-Men movie from 2000, and X2, X-Men United, and others, you know, like Days of Future Past. How awesome would X-Men movie figures be from MAFEX? There's so much MAFEX can get into, and I'm excited to see what else they'll bring to the table in the future. But anyway, that is the video. Hope all of you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments who you would like to see MAFEX touch up on in the future and what other lines you want to see them make. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, I will catch you on the next episode of Daredevil 19, and I will also see you guys later. So collectors are still experienced. Damn it.